Peace and justice are interdependent. You cannot have peace without justice. And conversely, you cannot have justice without peace. No justice, no peace. Since George Floyd was murdered by ex-police officer Derek Chauvin, there have been freedom protests across America, indeed across the world, because America has a long history of denying African Americans justice. Since its inception, America has failed to live up to her lofty goals of freedom and justice for all. If you are healthy, wealthy, white man, then justice has been the realm in which you reside. But for everybody else, justice has been elusive. The struggle for justice in this country is real. And most of the time, people of color, especially Black people, have experienced injustice. A Black Jew named Jesus is the Prince of Peace, but most of the world has still yet to experience real peace because most of the world has yet to experience true justice. Peace cannot exist without justice. No justice, no peace. The peace Jesus promises us is radically different from the peace we normally imagine. When most people say they want peace, it is their way of saying they want a cessation of hostilities. For instance, if two countries are at war, they try to negotiate the terms of a peace accord so the countries will be able to stop bombing and shooting each other. But the peace that Jesus promises us is more than just a cessation of hostilities. Jesus demands justice. Jesus's vision of justice is a realm where every boy and girl, every man and woman is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race and regardless of their social economic status, because we are all made in the image of God. When we agree to take up our cross and follow Jesus, it is not a passive acceptance of all of the injustice and inhumanity this world has to offer. Jesus expects us to be troublemakers. We should make the oppressors of this world feel uncomfortable, which means sometimes we have to protest. But it is not enough to discomfort oppressors through protest, nor is it enough to comfort the oppressed through charity. We need to tear down the structures that perpetuate oppression. Peace is not merely the absence of war and enmity or the absence of quarrel and strife. Peace is a state of being where everyone is whole, everyone feels secure, everyone is prospering, everyone is blessed, and everyone feels loved. Georgetown professor and preacher Michael Eric Dyson wrote a book entitled Tears We Cannot Stop, a sermon to white America. In this remarkable book, one of the things Dyson said that really resonates with me is justice is what love sounds like when it speaks in public. In other words, if we want peace in our homes, if we want peace on our jobs, if we want peace in our community, if we want peace in our country and peace in the world, we have to proclaim and practice love, period. During the civil rights movement, Dr. King preached a sermon entitled Loving Your Enemies. Dr. King said, "It seems to me that love is the only way." As our eyes look to the future, as we look out across the years and across the generations, we must discover the power of love. The power, the redemptive power of love. And when we discover that, we will be able to make this old world a new world. We will be able to make humanity better. Love is the only way. Dr. King wanted to give Blacks a roadmap on how to respond to the racism we were forced to deal with every day. Dr. King knew that there can never be peace without justice, and there can never be justice as long as there is racism. Isn't it ironic that some Americans were more upset with Colin Kaepernick for taking a knee during the national anthem than they were with Derek Chauvin for using his knee to murder George Floyd? It still makes me angry when I remember how the NFL owners told their players, who are mostly Black, that they cannot protest the racist police brutality that is so pervasive across America. And then last week, Drew Brees, the veteran quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, had the audacity to remind us of how they changed the narrative. The protest during the national anthem was never about patriotism. It was always, always about racism. But rather than have an honest dialogue about the racism that still exists in this country, the NFL owners decided to blackball Colin Kaepernick and vilify the players who followed his example by labeling them as being unpatriotic. During the civil rights movement, the people who benefited from white privilege used the same tactic. And then they said Dr. King and his followers were unpatriotic because they wanted to derail their efforts to dismantle segregation. Dr. King acknowledged that it was difficult, but not impossible, to love one's enemies. You know, uh, I'm sure it was hard for Dr. King to love people like Bull Connor and George Wallace, just like it's hard for us to love people like Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell. It's easy to love people who are kind to you, but Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Dr. King said that there are three ways the oppressed can respond to oppression. The first method is violence. But if people succumb to the temptation of using violence in their struggle to obtain freedom, unborn generations will be the recipients of a long and desolate night of bitterness. The second method is to give up and accept oppression because fighting is too difficult. But if we give up, neither the oppressed nor the oppressor will ever truly experience the redemptive love of Jesus Christ. The third and only acceptable method for dealing with our enemies is love, but not just any kind of love, redemptive love that resists evil in every form. Alone, we can never resist evil, but we're not alone. We have Jesus and we have each other. I'm so glad a new generation of freedom fighters are rising up to affirm that Black Lives Matter. As a global family, we can dismantle and destroy racism. In our text, Jesus warns his disciples then and us now that if we choose our new faith family over the family we were born into, we need to be prepared because our former family members will retaliate. Commitment always brings conflict. Nobody really cares if we say we are Christians. Talk is cheap. But when we start demonstrating we are committed disciples, we will encounter conflict. Political leaders don't care if we feed, clothe, and shelter every poor person in Ward 7. They probably would actually come and take a picture with us, and then they would send us some more poor people. But as soon as we demand that our tax dollars be shifted away from the military industrial complex, the police, and the prison industrial complex to programs that address the systemic issues that cause generational poverty, then we will have a fight on our hands. Charity is good, but charity is a poor substitute for justice. No justice, no peace. It's a slogan that is often repeated during Black Lives Matters protests. The Black Lives Matters movement is about Black self-determination. The movement rests on the undergirding principle that Black people have the inherent right to determine their own destiny, which means Black people should have control over how they are policed and who polices our communities. The slogan, no justice, no peace, takes the political position that the price that power must pay for the continued injustice against Black people is the loss of civil peace. No justice, no peace. Do not think that Jesus came to bring to the world full of injustice. No, Jesus did not come to make peace with an unjust world. Jesus has come with a sword. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes are wrapped stored. He has loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. So let us march on towards a new heaven and a new earth, where we will beat our swords into plowshares and our spears into pruning hooks, and we will study war no more. Let us march on towards a new heaven and a new earth where no one carries a gun, but everyone is armed with love. Let us march on towards a new heaven and a new earth where it is more important to remove racism than to placate patriotism. Let us march on towards a new heaven and a new earth where peace and justice are interdependent, where they are pervasive and intertwined into the moral fabric of America. God bless you, Hughes. Amen.